No one gets married just to feel like a maid. If you are tired of constantly fighting over housework, you're in the right place. In today's video, I'm going to help you figure out how to get your partner to help around the house without fighting. And stay tuned until the end. I'm going to share my personal story about how fighting over housework almost ruined my marriage. Hi, I'm Valerie. I'm a licensed therapist and relationship expert. Over the last 10 years, I have helped countless couples stop fighting and start communicating. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button right now. I want to share my best tips and strategies for building a better relationship with you. And in today's video, we're going to talk about how you can get your partner to help around the house without fighting. But first, a quick disclaimer. While I am a licensed therapist, I am not your therapist, and this video is for educational purposes only. Here's the problem. Creating a fair and equal partnership is really, really hard. I can't tell you how many couples come to my therapy office because they can't stop fighting about chores. And here's the reality. If you are constantly fighting about chores, it's actually a really, really big deal. Fighting about chores can lead to divorce because over time, you stop fighting about dirty dishes and you start fighting about bigger things like communication, respect, trust, love, and support. So if you can't seem to stop fighting about chores with your partner, you need to nip that in the bud. Next time you find yourself frustrated with your spouse because they haven't done their fair share of the housework, try these 5 tips. Tip number 1, tell your partner what you want. I know, this seems pretty straightforward, but I cannot tell you how many couples that I work with who don't actually communicate about what they want around the housework and how they want it done. It's impossible for your partner to read your mind. So if you want your partner to do their fair share of the housework, you need to talk to them. Take the time to tell them what you want. Tip number 2, set a minimum standard of care. Here's what I mean. In order to get the chores done and to stop fighting about them, you and your partner actually need to agree about what chores are going to get done, how often they're going to get done, and how you're going to do them. So let me give you an example. Let's talk about dirty dishes. That's a huge topic in my household. One partner might feel like the dishes need to get done after every single meal. Another partner might feel like, hey, we don't have to do the dishes until the next morning. It's really important for couples to come together and actually decide, how often do the dishes need to get done? What does it mean to do them? And what counts as clean? Now this might sound silly, but we have that old saying, common sense is not common. So it's really, really important that you and your partner sit down and discuss what are your minimum standards around chores, and make sure to compromise because you and your partner probably won't agree. But when you take the time to set a minimum standard of care, you're going to avoid the constant tug of war about who's right and who's wrong when it comes to getting these chores done. So if you want to get the chores done and you want to stop fighting, set that minimum standard of care. Tip number 3, remember, all time is created equal. It's really important that you and your partner talk about chores in terms of time. Your time is just as valuable as your partner's time. Your partner's time is just as valuable as yours. So when you're talking about what needs to get done, how you want to split up the chores, and when you're going to do it, talk about it in terms of time. And make sure to listen to your partner's perspective. Their time spent on mowing the lawn or repairing the house or doing dishes is just as valuable as the time you spend on vacuuming and folding the laundry. So when you're talking about chores, really talk about them in terms of time. And talk about what's reasonable in terms of how you spend your time and how your partner spends the time. This is a great way to avoid this tug of war over who's doing what and how often. Just talk about it in terms of time. Tip number 4, stop keeping score. And I know this is a really hard one. It is really hard to walk around the house and not keep a running score tab in your head of all the things you have done and all the things your partner has not done. But if you focus your time and energy on keeping score, I promise you, you will become resentful with your spouse and you're going to start a fight. Because when you have a running scorecard, it's hard not to criticize and compare. So it's important to just let some things go. What matters most in the end is your partner trying really, really hard to make you happy, and are they doing their best to make it fair? Tip number 5, check in about housework every week. I know, I get it, you're busy. I'm really busy too. But it's really important that you set aside 15 or 20 minutes every week to actually check in about the housework. This is a great opportunity to talk about what's going well and give your partner praise, and also talk about what's not going so well. Setting time aside every week is also a way to make sure you avoid getting dragged into these fights about housework when you're tired or hungry or just really frustrated that something hasn't gotten done. So it's really important to set that time aside, check in every week, and actually talk about how fair the housework has felt. And if you need to make any changes to your chore list, take this time to do it. Okay, so let's recap. Here are my top 5 tips to help you stop fighting about chores and start getting your partner to help around the house. Tip number 1, tell your partner what you want. Tip number 2, define a minimum standard of care. Tip number 3, remember, all time is created equal. Tip number 4, stop keeping score. And tip number 5, make time every week to check in about how things are going. So here's time for a personal story. My husband and I, we've been married for about 15 years now. And I know that's a really long time. But we still fight about housework. So if you find yourself fighting about housework, you're not alone. Now, over the years, my husband and I, we've gotten better and we use these tips. So our fights about housework really are more about changing things up, sharing the load, and making things more fair. But at the beginning of our relationship, it wasn't that way at all. We fought all the time about the chores. I'm a neat freak. He's a messy Nelly. So we would constantly butt heads about who was doing what and how much and how often and who was right and who was wrong. And because we were fighting so much, these fights got really dirty. And at the very beginning of our relationship, we actually almost broke up because we couldn't get a handle on our fighting. So if this feels true for you, if this is like you, try these tips. My husband and I, we've been together for about 15 years now. And while we still talk about chores and we still get frustrated with each other, we don't fight dirty. And our conversations are more and more about how do we make this more fair and how do we work together as a team. So try these tips and get out of that cycle of fighting in your relationship. If you like this video and you want to try out these tips, please comment below. I want to hear what tips work best for you in your relationship. And don't forget to download my free fair fighting checklist. The link's below. This free fair fighting checklist is your blueprint to stop fighting and finally start having a productive conversation again. Thanks for watching my video on how to get your partner to help with the housework without fighting. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be checking in every week with more tips and tricks on how to communicate better and how to build a better relationship. Talk to you soon.